Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Jerry Zaremski.
Good morning, Tom. How you doing?
Hey, great, Jerry. How you doing?
Good. I'm struck at what you're saying here about the Fed and the President. Are you saying that President Obama controls the Federal Reserve?
I'm saying that the president's influence, and obviously he appoints the Federal Reserve and he appoints the chairman, and it's consistent with the president's policy to try to engage in this stimulus policy that failed the first time, and now is utilizing it through the Federal Reserve System in a way that is not going to work for America and our job creators and for people that are struggling. And so I think the Federal Reserve, being appointed by the president, is consistent with the president's policies, and they're getting desperate to the point where stimulus, they think they're tripling down on stimulus now.
But the president
it's not going to work.
The president wouldn't make that decision. The Board of Governors of the Fed would make that decision. And I don't understand how you call it an Obama policy when the Fed's policy is set by this board, including Ben Bernanke, who was originally appointed by a Republican.
Sure. Yeah, but the Federal Reserve obviously serves at the pleasure of the president and represents the president's policies. And to me, it's going down a path of stimulus policy that doesn't work. And I think it needs to be articulated to the American public that if you want stimulus policy, which is not going to work, then support the president's agenda. To me, there's a better way to do it, and that's focusing on the private sector, stabilizing the market, and coming up with certainty so that folks can invest and put people back to work immediately and for the next generation.
Are you saying that the president told them what to do, and do you have any evidence of that?
No, I'm not saying that, Jerry. What I'm saying is that the Federal Reserve now is consistent with the president's policy, and the policy of stimulus, which we're seeing reflected at the gas pump and we're seeing reflected in food costs, to me is a dangerous policy for America, and I reject it. And I'm not saying the president's directing the Federal Reserve, but I'm saying the Federal Reserve is consistent with the president's policies, and those policies are failing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Brian Tumulty?
Congressman, I'm wondering whether you're relying on the ignorance of the American people about how the Federal Reserve works. And I'm really amazed that you would make such a comment about the Federal Reserve not being independent. And their stated purpose is price stability and a growing economy. Is that not your policy?
Brian, it's currency control, and they added job creation as the second policy of the Federal Reserve. And what they're trying to go down is
But it's been that policy for decades, Congressman.
Sure. But
low unemployment.
But, Brian, what they're going down is stimulus policy, which, to me, doesn't work. And the president is the commander-in-chief who started with stimulus policy, and now the Federal Reserve is continuing that policy. And I don't think that works for America, and I think the American people, when they look at the prices at the pump and they look at food costs, and this monetary policy is going to cause inflationary impacts, and that's going to hurt people day to day. So let's just be clear. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that the Federal Reserve is not an independent body. But what I'm saying is the Federal Reserve's demonstrated policies of stimulus are not going to work for America, and the president has bought onto those policies, and this needs to stop.
Okay, but they do not serve simply at the pleasure of the president. They serve for fixed terms. But you said earlier they served at the pleasure of the president. He cannot, remove Ben Bernanke before the end of his term, right?
You're absolutely right. He appoints them. And the point I'm trying to stress is that policy that's represented there is not a good policy for America. And that's what we need to articulate, and that's what we wanted to highlight this week.
Yeah, I have a little book here called, at my desk, The Federal Reserve System, Purposes and Functions, and it says that the president nominates the chairman and vice chairman, and they're confirmed by the Senate. I think the other members of the Federal Reserve are appointed by the different Federal Reserve banks.
Correct.
So there's only two members that are nominated by the president. Both are confirmed by the Senate.
I believe it's the 7 members, if memory serves me correctly, Brian. It's the 7 members of the Board of Governors that's selected by the president and reviewed and approved by the Senate. You're correct on that. But the point that I'm stressing is that the Federal Reserve is an independent body, but it is engaged in a policy that is consistent with the president's policy. And that policy of stimulus is not good for America long term, and we're seeing that reflected at the pump, and we're seeing that reflected at the grocery store. And to me, we need to change that course, and we need to get to long-term, basic, stable private sector